You're familiar with the klal that a Koton is ptur min mitzvahs. A Koton never incurs an onesh. No, it doesn't incur an onesh for committing an avera, not b'mezid, not b'shogeg. The Stipler Gaon, in his Sefer Kilos Yaakov Yevamis Siman Lamed Aleph, presents a well-known Chakira, whether that is because he was never instructed to keep the mitzvahs by the Torah, because the Torah does not address itself to minors, or is it just that the Torah does instructs everybody in the mitzvahs, but the Torah gives a blanket pass to a minor, a ptur onesh, but the Torah does direct itself to Kotonim, and it enjoins them to keep the mitzvahs also. Just if they're over, they get a ptur onesh. The Stipler cites the Tvua Shor and Siman Aleph Sifkat Mem Tes that brings a proof. It brings a proof from the fact that a shchitas Koton is good, whereas the shchita of a non-Jew is not valid and the animal is not kosher. It's in the vela, and it's not a avodah zarah. It's not the Gemara over there. Often says that Daf Yud Gimel in Chun, that from the fact that the Mishnah says that shchitas akum is nevela means to say that it's not aser bahano, it's only nevela, and it doesn't have a din of takruvas avodah zarah. It's aser only because a goy shchita is not good, is not valid, not because he was makarvit to avodah zarah. Now, the reason why a goy shchita is invalid is that, and it's in a vela, is because he's einay b'toras. He's not subject to the laws of shchita. He doesn't eat shchita. He may eat nevela. If one is not subject to the laws of a matter in the Torah, he is invalid to be an agent or a factor in that area. But from the fact that you see, now it's the case that if it is the case that the Torah does not address itself to minors, then neither is a Koton subject to the requirement of shchita. If so, why is his shchita any better than a nochri's? It seems that the Torah, says the Tvua Shor, that Torah does direct itself to minors also. And a Koton has been instructed about kashrus and shchita and all the mitzvahs, just that he's freed from an onesh. He's a kid. The Stipler quotes the Mishkanas Yaakov, Ebenezer Siman Mem Daled, who brings a proof for the other side of the Chakira. There is a machlokes between Reb Chia and Bar Kapara and Yevamis Lamed Gimel in the cases of a Zar who did the Avodah on Shabbos, Zar Sheshemes b'Shabbos, and a Baal Mum, a Kayan, who was a Baal Mum, not a Zar, not a non-Kayan, he was a Kayan, but he did the Avodah, so that's one variant. Baal Mum, you can't do the Avodah if you're a Baal Mum, even if you're a Kayan. And the other thing that was wrong is that he was Tameh. So we have a machlokes. Now, so whether is there going to be two averos here, or there's only one? Reb Chia says that there's going to be two separate averos for each one of the transgressions in all of the cases. Zar Sheshemes b'Shabbos is chayev because of Shabbos. He shechted a Zar that shechted is it's one of the avodas. Even he's not over. He's not. The shemush is if the Zar does the shchita, that's one of the avodas. Even though it's kosher for a Zar to do the shchita, but since he's not he did the rest of the avodas, the shchita becomes part of the avodas, and he's a Zar. No, that's not true. Somehow he did the avodas, and that created a chilul Shabbos. Baal Mum, and he's also chayev because he did these other avodas. A Baal Mum, he's chayev did the avodas when he was tamei. He's chayev on doing the avodah as a Baal Mum, and he's chayev it's doing the avodah for while he was tamei. But Bar Kapara, who's chaylik on Reb Chia, says there's only one avera. in each one of these cases because of the klal ein iser chal al iser. Once there is one iser already, a second iser cannot take effect. Now this klal is rather pretty much fundamental and rather much we don't find that there is anyone who disagrees to this. So it turns out if you would just learn up their machlokes as it sits as it seems, it would turn out Reb Chia would not hold the Venus or Chal, so he would hold that yes, you can have two Yisurim Bichal together, and that would be something that the Gemara doesn't want to leave in such a manner. So the Gemara, rather than have a machlokes over such a fundamental issue, where it would turn out that Reb Chia would not hold of the klal of Venus or Chal, but so the Gemara declares that the argument is whether two Yisurim can take effect in an object when they both take place simultaneously. This is more in Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, and Lamed Beis on the Beis you have the machlokes Bar Kapora and Reb Chia, and then on Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph you have the Gemara that fixes up the machlokes to be a case of simultaneous and b'vasachs. All agree that the rule is ein iser chal iser, right? And normally, and when they're sequential. But here it's a case of basach. The problem is, how does it happen that both Yisurim take place simultaneously? When Shabbos comes around, the Yisur of Zar Shimus has already been previously there. I mean, if he's a non-Kayan, he was a non-Kayan before Shabbos, so he wasn't allowed to do the Avodah before Shabbos came around. So when Shabbos came around, that was the second Yisur. So how does that take place? On top of the Isser of the fact that he's not a Kayan, he's doing the Avodah, and he had the Isser of doing the Avodah prior to Shabbos. And so the same thing, a Baal Mum prior to becoming Tameh was already not allowed to do the Avodah. He had an Isser of Baal Mum, right? So the Gemara suggests the case. What we're going to talk about, we're going to have a case of a Koton. Now, and he displays Beis Cyrus on Shabbos, not before Shabbos. Now that we say that a boy's bar mitzvah at age 13 in the day, that's only because we assume that he has these simonim of godless. There are physical simonim they have to have. He has to have the hair of a mature male. It doesn't have to have it fully, just two cyrus will do. And just that if we for giving him an aliyah to the Torah, he doesn't have to bring proof. We assume so. But for giving him, for being over the Aveir, then for an Aveir that, and especially since these Aveirs are Chomer Dika Aveirs, we want to know for sure that he's a Gadol, and we knew that before Shabbos he didn't have these two sires. So, for example, in the morning of Shabbos, we see that he has two sires, and then he goes ahead and he shechts. Now, the first case is he was a cut, right? So till he produced those two sires, Zar Shemesh doesn't apply to him, because so that until Shabbos he had no Isser, and then all of a sudden, as when Shabbos comes around, it applies to him, and then Shabbos applies to him at the same time as soon as it's Shabbos. The two Isurim of Zar Shemesh and doing a malach on Shabbos take hold simultaneously. Okay. Now, the same will go for a Baal Mum, and he did the Avodah when he was Tameh, even if he's a Kohen. And he was a Koton until he started doing the Avodah, so that till he did the Avodah, he had no Isser, because he's a Koton, or he had whatever a Koton has, and when it comes, even if he becomes Tameh, he's still before his Beis Saras showed up. It's still no Isser that applies to him. And the instant that he brings forth two Saras and shows the Simonim Gadol, he becomes a Gadol. Both of these Isurim, he's a Kohen and he's a Baal Mum. A Kohen Baal Mum cannot do the Avodah, and he's Tameh, and a Tameh Kohen cannot do the Avodah. So both of these Yisurim take place simultaneously, and we have a case of Basach. So it's a machlokes of Reb Chia and Bar Kapara holds that Chachira holds that Enes Echala listen normally when it's sequential, but when it's simultaneous, then we say both Isurim are there, and therefore in both these cases, two Averis were done, but Kapara holds, you still say Enes Echala listen, even if it's the Vasachs. Now, this is the Raya to our Chakira, the Koton Chakira, from the Mishkan Yaakov, the opposite direction that we had before. If we assume that our position in the Chakira, that the Torah does not direct itself to Kotanim and enjoins them to keep the mitzvahs, I mean, it does direct itself to Kotanim, it enjoins them to keep the mitzvahs, and just like the Daila, but the Torah gives a pass to a minor. He's ptur, he's an onesh. It's a free get out of jail card. So, but he's the same as the Gadol. He has the same mitzvahs, the same Yisurim. Then, even before the point of the arrival of Gadolus, the Yisurim of Zaris and Balmum Sheshimish have already applied to him in his state of katnus. We don't have a case of the Vasachas. The claim that this is considered bivasachas, simultaneous, is proof that the Torah does not address itself to minors. Meaning that they were never instructed to keep the mitzvahs, so that when a Koton attained Gadlus on Shabbos, both Isurim, Isur Malacha and Azar Sheshimish, they first apply to him on Shabbos and together simultaneously. And as soon as he brings the two shars, it's achal on him, the Isurim of the Torah, bivasachas. And also the Yisur of Balmum and the Yisur of Tuma and the Yisur of Shabbos and the Yisur of a non-Kayan doing it away. Says the Stipler, it would seem that the Gemara in Yevamos argues with the Gemara in Chulin over Chakira, over our Chakira, the Koton Chakira. Now, these are the words of the Stipler and the Kilos Yaakov Yevamos Siman Lamed Aleph. We will attempt to show that this is not the case, and this Chakira, there is no Chakira. Chaim Brisker, in a sefer on the Rambam, Hilchos Korban Pesach, it's Perek Hey Halacha Zayin for those who count the shtiklach of the Chaim. It's Chiddush number 94. If you're serious about Reb Chaim, you have to number every one of them, and it's a shame that they're not numbered in the form that come out. And the last one is 155. This is number 94. The Reb Chaim cites the difficulty of the Kesef Mishnah, who sees a contradiction in the Rambam. It's a whole different matter than we were discussing up to now. And we'll come to the point. When it comes to eating matzah, if a person becomes bar mitzvah in the middle of the week of Pesach, so that at Seder night he was not bar mitzvah, the Rambam rules that he must eat a kazayas of matzah again. Because what he did when he was a minor cannot be used to fulfill his obligation upon every Jew to eat matzah on Pesach. So that if he was, since he was a Koton when he ate the matzah previously on the Seder night, now when he was, he doesn't. What if you never get to eat matzah the rest of the Pesach? He just eats Pesach cake and rice if you hold like the mechaber and potatoes if you hold like the Ashkenazim. And he's never going to get matzah. He's not going to be out to the mitzvah of matzah. He can't eat it after Pesach. That's too late. So that and he's chayiv because since he became bar mitzvah in the middle of Pesach, he became chayiv. But it wasn't yotz of what he did previously. Now, if that's the din, frick the Kesef Mishnah, we would think that the same rule should obligate one who became bar mitzvah after Pesach, but before Pesach Sheni. Now we're talking about a korban and when there was a korban. Such a portion that so he became bar mitzvah after Pesach, so and before Pesach Sheni, so he should be chayav. A korban Pesach Sheni. Such a person would have to bring, just like he would have. Rambam Paskin that he has to eat matzah even though he ate it Seder night. So even though he ate from his family's Korban Pesach Seder night, he would have to bring another, and became bar mitzvah after Shabbos, before Iyar, Pesach Sheni, he would have to bring another Korban Pesach Sheni. However, the Rambam rules that he's not obligated. And he says, and the Rambam says, since he already was included in his family's regular Korban Pesach at the Seder. And the Kesef Mishnah's question is, why does the Koton's eating of Korban Pesach on the night of Pesach relieve him of Achi of Pesach Sheni if he turns bar mitzvah after Pesach? Whereas his eating of matzah is not considered a Kiyum mitzvah until he actually attains the status of a gadol. What's the difference? Chaim goes on to differentiate between the two mitzvahs. The mitzvah of bringing and eating a korban has a resultant. It has a taitzah, where in contrast, the mitzvah of eating matzah has no resultant. The bringing of a korban achieves an offering and an acknowledgement to Hashem, a reach nichoyach. Eating the matzah is the loyal performance of the commandment, but it has no further resultant. Hence, if performed by a koton, it isn't a mitzvah act, since the person being a koton is not obliged to do it. It's like eating matzah on a random day. It's optional. When is it going to be a mitzvah? When he eats it, after he's a bar mitzvah. It becomes bar mitzvah in the middle of Pesach. He's like everybody else who became. There's a halacha that if a person was a schizophrenic, where he was in his bad state during the Seder night, so he's not yotze, he's a shaita. And then if it becomes better during Chol Hamoed, he would have to eat a matzah, because this is enough in the Gemara. He would have to eat matzah. So the same thing would be with a bar mitzvah boy, because what he did when he was a shaita didn't help. So therefore, when he gets better, as long as it's still Pesach, he still has a chiyuv to eat matzah. A korban is an offering to Hashem. Any time, it's an offering to Hashem, and even if it's optional. So that if he ate the korban on Pesach, he already achieved the mitzvah and its resultant, its kiyum. Why should we have to do it again on Pesach Sheni? And I want to give you an example of Micah, but it's not point to point, but it brings out, if a koton yarshened a building, and the building had a balcony that didn't have a fence, or had the roof didn't have a fence, it was a flat roof, where you go out and use the top of the roof. You have to have a Micah, and what if when he yarshened it, there wasn't a Micah, so he puts up a Micah. What happens? He's a koton. And what happens when he becomes a gadol? Does he have to redo the Micah? Now, of course he doesn't have to redo the Micah. This has got nothing to do with not because of whether the Rambam is, you hold it the Rambam by Korban Pesach or not. He doesn't have to redo it, because if a guy bought a house with a Micah, he doesn't have to do a Micah. He doesn't have to. It's not like schach. You have to shake it up again and make another Micah. But just ask yourself, when he built that Micah as a koton, he did not have the kiyum of the mitzvah. The mitzvah is shel yipol ha'neifel, the security that there shouldn't be an accident. So did he not be makayim that? And when he did it as a koton, and did he miss doing that? I mean, if a person yarshens, if the person buys a building and it does already have a Micah, he doesn't have. He can build 10 more Micahs on top of the Micah, but he doesn't get a mitzvah out of it. It's there already. It's done already. And so we don't say. Are we saying that this koton that became gadol never had the mitzvah of building a Micah? When he did the Micah, he did what the tachlis of the resultant of the mitzvah, the kiyum of the mitzvah. He did it. He created security. Same thing over here. When he ate the korban Pesach on the Seder night, even though he was a koton, he created a reich nechoyach Hashem, and he doesn't have to do another time. He doesn't have to bring another korban. Comes Pesach Sheni, and if he's a gadol then. The line of reasoning put forward by Reb Chaim Brisker would seem to indicate that the Rambam as Reb Chaim interprets him, holds that the Torah does direct itself to Koton, but it doesn't enjoin them to keep the mitzvahs. In other words, the Torah was given to all of Klal Yisrael. So how's that possible if the Torah directs itself to Koton? So why isn't the Koton chayiv in the mitzvahs? Right? Up till now, we said either he's chayiv in the mitzvahs, just he gets a free pass, or the Torah doesn't address Kotonim. So how can we pick up the string about them? See, it addresses Kotonim, and the Kotonim are actually instructed and enjoined, and they're chayiv to do the mitzvahs, but they're ptur, but it's not a pass. The answer is that the way it works is that the Torah was given to all of Klal Yisrael. This is the Rosh Hashiva's Yesod. The Torah was given to all of Klal Yisrael, not to every individual as a first step. The first step was the Torah was given to Klal Yisrael, and as a second step, if you're a member of Klal Yisrael, so then all the mitzvahs and the chiyuvim and the mitzvahs aseh and the mitzvahs lo aseh that were commanded apply to all the members of Klal Yisrael. But the first step is that the Torah addresses itself to Klal Yisrael, not to an individual member. It just applies to every single member. Now, minors, Kotanim, are part of Klal Yisrael. Then, as through substitution, the Torah is addressing Kotanim also. So they're addressed, and they have this. And if they're a member of Klal Yisrael, which they certainly are, they have the same chiyuv as a gadol, but the dinim only apply to adults, not minors. And Kotanim aren't required to perform the mitzvahs. Hence, the idea of the mitzvah, an Indian mitzvah, is a mitzvah. When a Koton accomplishes it, is also. And if the Torah said, "Go put a mic up on so that shelo yipol hanayfel," and he puts it up, he was commanded to do it. And when he's putting up, and after he puts up the mic, he performed the kiyum mitzvah. He didn't just do a nice thing. He didn't just do a good deed. He did a mitzvah. In other words, what did he do? Even though he's not chayiv to do it, because he was instructed as a fellow member, and it's just that the chiyuv, he's not constrained by the mitzvah, but the mitzvah was chal on him. It's only true then if there's an Inyan mitzvah, there's a resultant to the mitzvah in the doing of the mitzvah. If the mitzvah has no result and it's just an action that has to be performed, then a Koton's action can't be called a mitzvah, since the Torah doesn't impose the execution of any action upon him. It's not a ma'aseh mitzvah. If he put on tefillin, it's not a ma'aseh mitzvah. If he shakes lulav, it's not a ma'aseh mitzvah, because all there is to do to tefillin and to lulav is an action, and that action is only going to be a mitzvah if you're mechuyev, and since you're not mechuyev, it's not. But a korban has a result. It produces a reach nechaya, and it's since he was instructed to bring a korban, even though he doesn't have to, but when he does, he's doing as per his instructions, and he's creating this reach nechaya. Now, this represents a new position and does not correspond to either side of the Stipler Gaon's Chakira. According to that, the Rosh Hashiva's understanding, and based on the Reb Chaim and the Rambam, the proof of the ptur shor no longer holds. A Koton has been presented with the Isser of Nevela and the mitzvah of Shechita. Hence, his shechita, he's betyrus these dinim, and so he can be an agent in these dinim. His shechita is valid, just that the dinim don't take effect to apply to him. This is fundamentally different than being chayiv but having a ptur or onesh. He's not chayiv. And with a ptur onesh, he was instructed, and just that the effect of instructions doesn't apply to him, and it's also different than not being addressed. He was addressed. The Torah instructed him, because it instructed every member of Kol Yisrael. By this reasoning also, it's a case of B'vasachas, as the Gemara wants to say it is in Yevamos. So when he comes to Gadol on Shabbos, a Koton has been presented with all the Isurim in the Torah. It's just that they don't take effect until he reaches Gadolus. When they do take effect, they take effect simultaneously. So the Yisur of doing a non-Kohen doing a Veda is Chal at the same time that the Yisur of it takes place and it takes effect on him the same minute that he together and whenever he brings the Beis Cyrus. Now, it is true that a Koton never incurs an onesh for committing Avera, but there's no Chakira left anymore. It's not the case that a Koton was never instructed to keep the mitzvahs because the Torah did not address itself to minors. It certainly does. The Torah addresses itself to all of Kol Yisrael, and he's a minor. Koton is certainly part of Kol Yisrael. He doesn't just pop into gain membership when he becomes a Gadol. And it's not just that the Torah gives a blanket pass to a Koton, a ptur onesh. The truth is that even though the Torah does direct itself to Koton and commands them, instructs them, and it tells them and about all the mitzvahs and all the Yisurim, but they cannot take effect upon him. This instruction can't take effect upon him until Gadolus. He is the Torah's shechita, and he has Isser Nevela, but the actual tzivui does not apply to enjoin him. It was said to all of Klal Yisrael, which he's a member of all of Klal Yisrael, but it doesn't have that second step where it applies to the members. Therefore, his b'taras and shechita is good, but he doesn't have any chiyuv of Isser Shabbos, and he doesn't have any chiyuv of Zar Shemish if he's not Kohen, and he doesn't have a chiyuv if he's a Baal Mum, if doing the Vayt if he is a Kohen, and when he brings those two sires on Shabbos, he brings those two sires right before he after his Tomei, and of course he's already been a Baal Mum, so then both those Isurim apply to him at once, b'vasachas. Okay. Reb Chaim points out that there's another problem still. After he said his Yisites, our original Stipler's Chakira seems to collapse, but he says the way he's understanding now, and how we understand now the difference between becoming bar mitzvah and as far as his eating matzah and as far as his bringing Korban Pesach, it turns out there's a difficulty still left. And after we answered the Kesef Mishnah, there's still a difficulty left. In order to protect of a Korban Pesach, one needs to be part of a Chabura. That means one must be counted in before the Hakrava of the Korban. It has to be Hamnoah. And although a Koton is not obligated, and if he's not counted in, he incurs no penalty for eating Korban Pesach at the Seder. But Reb Chaim shows that a Koton, from the Gemara, so Reb Chaim shows that a Koton needs to be counted in with a Chabur. In Psachim, Perik Ches, Pei Ches Amud Aleph, Daf Pei Ches Amud Aleph, we find the case of a Koton with two apotropos and he has two guardians. Another day, how he ended up with two legal guardians. Doesn't have parents. Each of which counted the Koton in with his Chabur. The Gemara says that the Koton can join either one of the two Chaburas. He has a choice. The question arises, what does a Koton need a Chabura for? A Koton is Koton min ha-mitzvos. A Koton never incurs an onesh for committing an Avera. So what does he need to be part of a Chabura? Reb Chaim answers, in order to achieve the resultant of the offering of the Korban Pesach. If he wants to have a reich nechayach, he has to become part of the chabor. You're right, he could eat it, and nothing happens to him, but he wasn't Mekayim that inyan of reich nechayach Hashem on a Korban of Korban Pesach. Even if he isn't required to join a chabora, if he wasn't counted in with the chabora, he does not achieve the idea of the mitzvah, and he would have to bring another Korban Pesach Sheni, and if he turns bar mitzvah before Pesach Sheni, if he should reach bar mitzvah. Rav Chaim continues, much the same is true of an adult woman. She's not obligated. She doesn't bring Korban Pesach. It's a mitzvah aseh man glama. But if she wants to partake, she must be counted in with the chabor. And now we understand, because if she won't be counted in the chabor, she won't have the kiyum of the mitzvah. There is a difference, however. We find that a Koton does not have to formally request to be counted in. It can be, and his father or his guardians take it upon themselves to count him in without his knowledge at some point before the offering of the Korban Pesach. And he can rightly then join the Chabora on the Seder night. With an adult woman who has she's attained to a majority, counting her in without her knowledge doesn't secure her inclusion with that Chabora. She must be apprised, and she must consent to having been counted in. Now she has to find out about it, or she can instruct somebody to count her in. If Chaim asks, what's the difference between an adult woman and a minor? Both are not obligated. He, because he's a minor, who is always ptur of all the mitzvahs, and she, because in the Korban Pesach takes effect only at a particular time, and all women, all Israelios are free of performing any time-bound mitzvah. Now, if a minor can be counted in without his knowledge, why not an adult? If you don't have a chiyuv, why does she have to request or at least consent to be included? If Chaim's next step will be to differentiate between the freedom of a Koton from all the mitzvahs and any mitzvah obligations, and the release of an adult woman from the performance of mitzvahs aseh shazman grama. The Torah certainly addresses and means to instruct adult women in all the mitzvahs. Even the ones that are zman grama. The fact that she's released from mitzvah aseh shazman grama means that a time-bound mitzvah acts as an instrument, a device that prevents the commandments from taking effect, from applying to her. It's an ikuv. Whereas for a Koton, the analysis is different. Any and all commandments cannot apply to a minor simply because he lacks his majority. He lacks the intelligence that is required to be responsible. There needs not be nothing to prevent the mitzvahs from applying to him. Even the Torah is addressing and instructing minors with the mitzvahs. It cannot take effect, and it cannot take place to affect him significantly. They apply to him in name only, not in din. He lacks grounds for the requirement of keeping the mitzvahs. Hence, he's not constrained by the commandment of the mitzvah, even though it was directed to him also. Adult women, noshim, however, would be required and constrained to perform all the mitzvahs, because they were instructed, they were addressed also. But the fact of being a mitzvah that is zman grama, a time-bound mitzvah, acts as a screen. It's a screen that prevents the commandment from taking effect on her. That's why Nashim can say in their bracha, Asher Kitshano b'mitzvahs of Vitzivana. Just like schar males can. They were instructed. Vitzivano, we understand, because all of Klal Yisrael is instructed. The question is, how is it Asher Kitshano if it doesn't apply to them, if it was blocked? Because if it doesn't apply to them, so then they're doing it as optional, so then where's the Kitshano? The answer is, the instruction that the Torah and the address of Torah to women that the Torah did when the Torah was commanded all these mitzvahs should really have taken effect upon her. So it's correct to say tzivano, and she gains kedusha from the performance of these mitzvahs. Right, but since the reason she's constrained and is it's like a shelter, which prevents the mitzvah from becoming incumbent upon her. But the mitzvah was directed to her and actually does apply to her, but is blocked. She's sheltered from being obligated. And that's different. So therefore she can make a bracha. She can say tzivana, she can say a kitchana. The Koton makes a bracha because it's chinuch. If it wouldn't be for chinuch, maybe he wouldn't even be able to make a bracha. Rav Chaim's last step, we're not finished with this, but we've done with the step we've done Chakira. We've seen that there is no more Chakira left. It's not like the to a shore said, it's not like Mishkanas Yaakov said, it's loiha v'loiha. But Reb Chaim's he has another problem. Why? Okay, we've come to an understanding of the difference between the ptur of Zman Grama and the ptur of Koton. But why does this factor make a difference in whether when you're joining Chabor and whether you have to be told about it, whether you have to, or you can be done for you? The answer is we have to add in this following clarifications. There are two factors in bringing any korban. One is getting the korban qualified, and so that it's not puzzle. Number two, affiliating the offerer with the korban so that he's credited with that bringing that korban. It is possible to have a korban and it's valid and it's kosher, but the owner won't be credited with bringing it, and he must offer another in order to dispatch any obligations that he has. An example of such a case is where the kohen sacrificed the korban thinking that it was an oila, but in fact it was to be a shlomin. In that case, the korban is kosher. You can't eat an oil, but however, you don't have to. You can. It's not puzzle, and I would say that the nafmin is that a kohen has gets the hide of an oil. So if it would be puzzle, he couldn't have it. It's puzzledic. It had to be destroyed, but here it's kosher. But in our case, according to Rav Chaim's interpretation, an adult woman has the mitzvah of bringing korban pesach, but she's not actually constrained to bring it because time-bound mitzvahs block any obligations to take effect upon her. If she does choose to take part in the korban pesach, then she needs to be affiliated with the korban. Since she needs to be affiliated with the korban in order to get credited for having performed the mitzvah. She's going to have the kiyum mitzvah, the reich nechayach, but how's she going to be connected? How's she going to be affiliated so that the reich nechayach is credited to her? Now, this can only happen if she actively chooses to join the chabor, or if they tell her that they're going to count her in, even though she doesn't actively do it, and as long as she consents and she knows about it. Counting her in without her knowledge will leave her without an affiliation to the korban. But a kohen doesn't need to be credited with bringing a korban pesach. He's not chayiv at all, since mitzvahs don't apply to him. Hence, he's not required to actively join. It's enough just to count him in, even without his knowledge, so that his eating is a reich nechayach Hashem, and he does. And if you were to become later bar mitzvah before Pesach Sheni, he already did what the kiyum of bringing korban pesach and eating korban pesach does, so he doesn't have a second chiyuv for that year.